All right, everybody. So we're going to get started getting back in here with classical China. Where we've come from before is we've covered the Zhou dynasty, and at the end of the Zhou dynasty, we see that mandate of heaven cycle through, and ultimately we have philosophers trying to restore the peace, Confucianism, but ultimately legalism is what reestablishes China under the Qin dynasty with Qin Shi Huangdi. But understand that Qin Shi Huangdi is really only a single emperor as a dynasty. And ultimately, the Han dynasty sort of extends some of the things that were done during the Qin dynasty and sort of move this forward. So, most of why the Qin dynasty fell was the lack of ability by the government to control massive peasant uprisings. And so ultimately, the Han dynasty begins with an era of peace by putting an end to these uprisings by the peasants. Now, you have a period of stability, prosperity, peace. You can see a reduction in the oppression by the emperor towards its subjects. And most importantly, you can compare this to other golden ages that we've discussed in the classical era, like the Pax Romana, even the time of Pericles in ancient Greece, although a different time, but also the Gupta Golden Age. And the beauty of this is the trade between China and India and Rome leads us to having peaceful movements within all three of these cultures at a very similar time. And so understand that when we're moving into the Han dynasty, we keep the centralized government from the Qin dynasty, and we're actually going to add on a civil service exam. So what this means is we're going to keep what Qin Shi Huangdi created, which is the legalism philosophy, but we're also going to add in the importance of Confucianism and establish it within the culture. And so if you would like to work for the government, for this bureaucracy and organization of labor, all you had to do was pass this test. And so this really creates an upward mobility that you would not see in Hinduism in India. This really provides, if you are a lower socioeconomic level, you could still be a part of the government and very high status at that point. So the person that you need to know for the Han Dynasty is Emperor Wu Ti, and Wu Ti is responsible for actually implementing this actual civil service exam. And we're trying to expand the organization, but do understand the purpose. It allows a check on the power of the nobility. So just because you own land or just because your family was supported by the emperor under the Zhou dynasty does not mean you will be supported now. And so it's a buffer created between the emperor, supported by the heavens, and the government. And so the government can be a buffer to the nobility. And really, the formal training, and this is really where it is stabilized, is with Confucianism. You demonstrate your ability to be a good leader of the government if you can show your understanding of Confucianism. So things like filial piety. Can you demonstrate respect towards elders? Can you be obedient, not just following orders, but obeying them? And it's really understanding the ethical nature of Chinese culture. And so, really, you create this new class of people called scholar bureaucrats. We call them jinshi. And really, this creates a stability because ultimately, you don't just have one person responsible for carrying out all these actions. You have essentially an army of people that can help you complete this. So with this era, we really see a lot of things added. So I mentioned with the civil service exam, you would take the actual exam itself, and if you passed, you could become a part of the government. And this is important too because it shows a changing view on the military. Going forward, China does not necessarily emphasize military values. They emphasize oneness with nature, understanding respect towards elders, and embodying the ideals of Confucianism. And this is going to be much more important. The political institution of China is going to outweigh the benefits of having a strong military and expanding. Now, when we get into the Han in general, we still do have a military. Now, although most of the focus is on having an excellent government that can maintain and support the needs of the people, but this is the largest we have ever seen China, and you can even see on the northern boundary of the empire the beginning of this Great Wall, which this public works project is a great example of centralizing the empire. You have the people pay taxes, and with those taxes, you can build things like the Great Wall of China. Now, understand with expansion also includes increased emphasis on trade. And ultimately, the trade, we will see the Silk Road extend all the way through China into the Indus Valley. And the Parthian Empire is really just northwest of what we've seen before. And the beginning of the Silk Roads is starting to take shape. So we're really seeing what we understand as Chinese culture, thinking of things like the Great Wall, the civil service exam, Confucianism in the government, with filial piety, and then even the Silk Roads. These are the things of China that will continue throughout our 5,000 years study of its culture. Now understand too that because in India, under the Guptas, they really stress Hinduism over Buddhism, and so Buddhism starts to spread into China. And China tends to be rather open, especially with the concept like Buddhism, where it really is tolerant of other ideas. Now, also understand that even though the Han Dynasty was effective, we still see commonalities with the fall of the empire, just like the Zhou. You see invasions by the Huns, and this was really nomads that lived north of this wall here. The Chinese were trying to protect invasion from them. But again, understand that peasant uprisings, nomadic powers from the north attacking, these are all reasons why dynasties fall, and the Han Dynasty is no exception. Put a star next to this. This is a great example, and really things that you will see again and again is the peasants may not necessarily feel that they are supported by the government. And there is a phrase within Chinese culture that says that the heaven is high, but the emperor is farther away, meaning you will not necessarily feel the role of the emperor. And ultimately, this is another example of the falling of the mandate. So you would have the Han Dynasty emperors, they're in favor with the people, and then you have invasions from the north, that's a strike against you. You're unable to control the vast empire that you've created, and then you're also unable to control the fighting from within as well. And so this Yellow Turban Rebellion are a group of angry, very angry Taoists who eventually go against the Confucian government because they don't feel that is actually taking care of them. And so really what we see is at the end of the Han Dynasty, an era of squabbling. You go through centralization, decentralization, centralize again, decentralize, centralize again, and really this state of chaos, this Three Kingdoms period, we can really compare to the era of warring states between the Zhou and the Qin dynasty. Okay, so that's all we have for today. I know that was a lot of information. Please email me with any questions that you might have, and we'll go from there. Thank you.